Hey everyone, it's Brooke here from Anita Goodesign, and today I will be teaching you how to turn a quilt block into a pot holder. So there's a few things you need before you get started. That's your finished quilt block. You're going to need your back fabric, your binding. You're going to need a piece for a loop if you prefer a loop, and you will also need your pins, scissors, and a safety pin. So let's go ahead and get started. Here you can see we have our finished quilt block and we have our back fabric trimmed to the exact size of our quilt block. So what we're going to do is flip our quilt block right side facing down, and we're going to take this fancy back fabric that I have here. We're going to lay it on top of our block, and we are going to pin this in place. This will secure it as we stitch it around before we decide to put on our binding. So I'm just going to add a few pins here and there, and then we will head on over to our sewing machine. Now, as you can see here, we stitched together our back fabric and our block either using that 1/2 inch seam allowance or by following our tacking stitch line. So you can go ahead and remove your pins, and we will now create our loop. Now for our loop, I'm just going to put that to the side. For our loop here, we used a denim fabric for the loop and the binding. Now you can use any sort of material that you choose for this, but for this size, I used a 2 inch in width by a 5 inch in length. Now your loop can be any size that you really desire for your project. This is the one I chose for today. So now that you have your loop piece cut out, we're going to go ahead and fold that in half. Now if you have a steamed iron, you can press it in place, but I'm going to go ahead and put a couple pins in. And now remember, we're folding our loop with right sides together. We will head over to our sewing machine and we will stitch just along the edge on the straight side. Now that we've left both ends open, you can take your safety pin and we're going to hook the safety pin through one side of our fabric, and we're going to feed the safety pin through the channel. This helps us flip our loop right side out. Now it is time to figure out where you would like to place your loop on your pot holder. You can put it along a straight edge or you can put it on a corner. For today's project, I will place it along the straight edge at the top of our block. We're going to go ahead and fold our loop in half and pin it in place. Now we will stitch across following that tacking stitch line. Now it is time to attach your binding. You're going to want to measure around your entire quilt block. This will be the length of your binding. Now I'm going to use 40 inches in length. This will give me room to overlap my binding at the end, and I used a 2 inch width. To begin your binding, you're going to want to start by folding your binding into a triangle. Once you have this all set, you're going to align the edge of your binding with the edge of your block. We will now stitch using our tacking stitch line or the 1/2 inch seam allowance that you usually leave behind your block. We're going to start at the beginning of our bias tape and we're going to stitch all the way down until we hit that corner, and then we are going to stitch off at a 45-degree angle. So you'll start at the beginning of your binding, head all the way down, leave your needle down and lift your presser foot, pivot, and stitch off using a 45-degree angle. Now you will take your binding and you're going to fold it back onto itself, like so. Once you have it like this, you can pin it in place along this straight edge and this straight edge. As a bonus tip, I like to place a pin right at the corner of my block. That way I know where I want to leave my needle down, pivot, and stitch off at a 45-degree angle. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start at our corner here, and we're going to go straight all the way down until we hit that pin. We're going to leave our needle down and pivot and stitch off at a 45-degree angle. Next, you will repeat that process on the remaining two sides. Once you hit your last corner, you're going to pick up your binding and fold it against itself, just like you did in the previous corners. You'll want to pin it in place and make sure that your binding overlaps the beginning of your bias tape. Now pin it in place and stitch. Now we will pull our binding back towards the back of our fabric, nice and taut. You may need to flip your design over. Now we will double fold our hem against our tacking stitch line. Now before we head on over to our sewing machine, we're going to go ahead and pull our loop back. This will make it stay right side up when we're ready to hang it, and we're going to pin it in place. Now we will head on over to our sewing machine and stitch in the ditch. Now the very last step in this process is to stitch across the top edge to assure that your loop stays in place. If you would like to leave it how it is, it will definitely hang right side facing up, but this just ensures that if it's laying flat, it's not flopping all over the place. So we're going to go ahead and just stitch across the top edge. And now you have a pot holder. Now look how cute and easy this project is. You can see we use some fun, festive fabrics within our quilt block. Now when you're turning a quilt block into a pot holder, there's just a few things we like to keep in mind. That is, if you are building your quilt block from scratch, you will want to make sure that you are using an Insul-Bright material. This will protect your countertops and your hands if you are using any hot items. The next thing you'll want to focus on is your type of fabrics when using them against hot materials. Cotton and denim were a great combination for this project as they are durable and strong. Well, thank you all for joining me today on teaching you how to piece together your pot holder. I hope you had fun. Happy sewing!